All right. Hello, everybody. Friends, colleagues, subscribers, scientists, all those on the greater good for humanity and more. It's Friday, April the 17th, 2026. It's about 8:45 p.m. Central Standard Time, and we have Adam on call with us tonight. And we're doing this special podcast concerning some new activity that's unfolded and developed. Some interesting things, quite interesting, so to say, that have just recently popped up in the public domain. Primarily speaking of Alex Jones and some other scientists that have decided to also come forward and start. And I'm not saying that Alex Jones is a scientist. What I'm saying is Alex Jones has decided to lightly salt and pepper and break the ice with some Magneto collapse information. And we're going to take it to the next level tonight and discuss some things revolving around that. So, welcome, Adam. Go ahead
Hello.
and start with what you got on your side, sir.
Oh, yeah. Well, um, so I'm in Ponca City, Oklahoma, and we just had a pretty big tornado roll through here. And when I say roll through here, I mean right over me and almost took me and my neighbors with it. I sent John some articles and some information last night that has come to light about what he and I have both been discussing. And then it seems like a tornado came right at me. I live next to the refinery. So if anybody knows about tornadoes and refinery and heat and all that good stuff, we never have tornadoes get close to the plant. It's never happened in the whole existence of that plant being there. Tornadoes do not take that path. And now I've called around and see where people have seen it. It looped all the way around towards the plant and then dispersed and then like came back down like right at my house like after the plant. With tornadoes never taking this path and the 40 plus years of my existence, and nobody older than me can remember it either. So there's that. It was close. Like I'm just glad I'm here. Like by the time I was outside, looking because we were under a warning, I seen it and yelled at my neighbors and ran from the back of the house to the front. And he beat me to the street and he said, "There it is." And then I peeked out and saw it in the street. And I had time to run and grab my three dogs on a leash and throw them literally down in the cellar. Like if it had been on the ground, I would not be talking to you right now. There was no warnings, there were no sirens, there was no time. And it had been on the ground for a bit before it even made it to me. So why we didn't get any sirens or anything until it was already basically through the whole town, I don't know, but I'm a little upset. So that's what happened to me.
Yeah, that's quite a scary story you got there. How do you feel knowing that every week during the month your trusty government is testing out those tornado and wind sirens every week, uh, knowing that you didn't get a warning when something touched down?
Work when they need. Yeah, it's pretty aggravating that those sirens should be blaring if there's even sight of a, it doesn't need to be on the ground. You know what I mean? Like my neighbors told me, their grandchildren saw it like, a mile and a half, almost 2 miles from me. He's starting to come down. Like so somebody knew. You know what I mean? Like I don't know. Like I made a post on Facebook about it and I'm going to City Hall on Monday. I can tell you that.
What's the what's the power situation like there?
Dead.
Yeah, completely
I
dead.
can't see a light. Yeah, I can't see a light for. Yeah, nobody has power that I can see.
Yeah, it's kind of funny that you're mentioning all this. There have been quite a few times when we had similar events, and yeah, we've had some tornadoes touch down in our areas near Plano, and they didn't really play any sirens. But when the jet stream ceiling was coming down and we were getting winds over 120 miles an hour, they did play the sirens, right? And when I went out traveling the area, and this is without rain, by the way. When I went out traveling the area to scout for a tornado, I didn't see any. So first thing I did was called into dispatch and I stated, "Hey, like what's going on over here in the area? I need some intel on that." The first thing they stated was, we're playing it because of the amount of dangerous wind that's coming through right now." So I asked him again. I was like, "Wind or tornadoes?" Because generally these sirens are active for tornadoes. In fact, that's usually what the testing for every Wednesday is. So, is it wind or tornadoes? And they were like, "Well, they're planning for activity for high winds, so those sirens are more tailored towards high winds." So I thought that was interesting. Um, but yeah, they do a lot of periodic testing weekly, and
Every week they
you
test here. Every
right.
week.
And they supposedly they got these hydrogen stations and these battery backup stations where all that should be active. So I couldn't foresee any reason why any of that should be failing whenever it comes to alarming or warning. So in your case,
It's
I'm assuming it's the
I
same.
just I find it convenient. You know what I mean? Because it's like I'm on the south, like you'd consider like the poor end of town. You know what I mean? There's nice houses over here, but like it's always been just like the poor side, even though it's like coming, it's not that way anymore. But I'm almost wondering if they just didn't blow the sirens. Just, I don't know. Maybe they thought the whole neighborhood was going to go. You know what I mean? Because it literally would have ripped through 3 miles of neighborhoods before the sirens came on. I don't know. That's
Yeah,
kind of conspiracy brain, but like still, it's ringing in my mind.
yeah. So there were additional reports that were coming out, yesterday and earlier today. Uh, we're already in that 48-hour window, like where we're having like a geomagnetic storm, and the reports for the magnetosphere are going to be greatly impacted. So they predicted that the northern lights would be pretty visible down here, like as far as Texas. However, like when looking at the magnetometer out on spaceweather.com, you don't really see too many updates there showing anything regarding where the northern lights are actually going to be hitting. So, this is the whole problem with the telemetry data is that you know they only they only give you the data for what they want you to see. So we always know that we're never going to get like the accurate numbers on that. But like I said, one thing is certain is that we can definitely see the polarity changes between sky and ground, and we definitely have a situation where the cloud ceiling is lowering. And if we're looking at the timetables, I know a lot of viewers and like-minded individuals that tune in and want to understand this information better always ask the question, um, when are we going to see something more extreme? And I've always explained, and this is through documenting and studying and observing the phenomenon, right? That these things take time, right? As we're getting hit or pelted with these sudden electromagnetic changes, there are these subtle shifts. Some last or take more time than others. Sometimes the pressure is weaker or stronger. And this plane that we're all existing on in this Earth bubble is extremely large. So time and scale is different whenever it comes to observation. But generally, the consensus that I've come to the conclusion to is my estimated measurement of time in the evaluation period is at least every 3 months, you will see a lower drop in the clouds ceiling. So tonight, based on some articles that have come out that's been brought to my attention, um, we're going to call some channels out at this point because there's uh, it's time to do it
Yeah,
because
basically
this.
what you've been preaching about is like I can see it. Like I've seen it because I pay attention, right? So I'm on board. But like nobody else has been on board with you at all. Like let's be clear here. You were the first one to put it together, right? And we're close with what we said yesterday, or I mean the day before and left off at before like we got, all split up. But this even correlates into the magnetic field affecting your brain, right? And your stems and everything, like your spinal cord, like, and that's why there's another guy that John's gonna go through this information with, but he talks about why they're putting stuff in the food, basically kind of what I was saying. And then that how that ties into the Zombie Preparedness Act, because when this happens and it starts to degrade, you literally are going to waste away and deteriorate for 3 or 4 months, like in your brain state. Like your waves, the energy is going to change, and like you're just going to like waste away into nothing. So all of it is starting to make a lot more sense, and I don't like it personally, but like this is where the information is going.
Yep. So there's an article that came out today that was published. Um, First, let's just say this. So there are several channels I've tried to reach out to. Right. Um, Paul Begley is one of those channels, and him and Heidi Begley did do an interview with me, and we did talk a long time ago, several years ago, about um, a couple of things. One is the magnetosphere and the barometric pressure signs that we're clearly seeing and observing. And there was a period of time where I did a travel between New York City and the California West Coast. So between the West Coast and the East Coast, I did a trip from the East Coast all the way to the West Coast and did a complete um, barometric pressure reading from side to side across the United States. And I observed quite a lot of things, and I experienced a lot of different, you know, pressure pains, like when you're traveling
Like
through
you're
different
flying.
pressure. Yeah, yeah, exactly. And a lot of people, they'll pull out the small scale stuff, terms, expressions, and say, well, that's just because, you're at one elevation and you're switching to another elevation. But no, we're talking about it's a little more complex than that. When we're actually experiencing a squeeze, um, let's just say that you're already, at one elevation. Where we're talking about as you're traveling through that same elevation, you're still experiencing sudden pressure changes. And so if I'm, let's say, at 3,000 feet and I'm getting like a certain amount of reading on my barometric pressure gauge, you know, if it's like 0.29 or, point, or if it's, yeah, like 3 bar, you would see like a 1 bar difference shift in certain zip codes and certain zones within a very short period of time. And that's a big change. That's a huge swing. So um, so that information itself was documented, but you can actually see this just being stationary somewhere. And most of your weather personnel that predict the weather generally say, well, you should be seeing, you know, different types of weather phenomenon while that change is going on. like
Like
low pressure
tonight.
systems or high pressure systems. Yeah, yeah. But believe it or not, in some of these travels and in some of these stationary settings, those changes that were pretty drastic at that bar level showed absolutely no weather change phenomenon. It was strictly a pressure change. Uh, and it wasn't something that was magically creating clouds, in the sky, or, something like that, where somebody would just say it's strictly weather, it's going to start raining or something like that. No, we're talking a complete, 1 bar barometric pressure change. Um, no rain, no clouds in the sky, things of that nature, just things that don't make any sense. So, I did document that phenomenon in my travels. In this case, there's a lot of things that we've been seeing over the past couple of years. One is um, interesting colors in the magnetosphere. If you see a lot of the satellites that NASA puts up in the upper atmosphere that are floating around up there that they say are capturing the northern lights, you'll notice that that band of northern lights has been a luminescent green, a very high fluorescent green color. Well, I've done several broadcasts back in the day where I explained a lot of interesting things about ancient history that's been covered up, and that is regarding civilization resets, things that are never accepted or talked about in the public domain. It's kind of like, where today we have a lot of information that's going digital. They try to sway people from looking at old archived books, things like that. They want to put it in digital format, rewrite history, and make everybody, like the newer generations, forget everything that's going on. But the more you investigate a lot of the information, you will see that actually, from past civilizations, there were times when the magnetosphere actually collapsed, and this green luminescent northern light type of phenomenon that you see was documented in some periods of ancient history, which may have been responsible for the petrification of all topside life. Things like the terracotta army, um, lots of different organic life being petrified instantly. There have been reports that have come out, like where people have found animals that are, completely petrified wherever they are. It's not really reported too much in mainstream, but there are a lot of different phenomenon that does make it into the headlines every once in a while, sometimes about these petrification events.
Yeah,
So
Mud Fossil University covers some of that sometimes. Like he's an interesting guy to chat
yes,
with.
and that brings up another good point, Adam. Yeah, Roger Spur at Mud Fossil University has been documenting, mud fossils, petrified life. He's actually taken things from animals and organic life, even human stuff. He has what he calls this process is the process of rehydrating the blood that is comes from the petrified samples that he has taken from giants, from all different types of life forms. Um, so you can imagine, when I try to illustrate some of these points, right? You have to you have to think about old history, and you got to be really prepared to be able to absorb some hard truths. Truths like, is the Earth a giant creature? Um, just some absolutely hard truths to absorb around that fact. But I'm gonna move past that and try to go back to the part about the magnetosphere and the petrification event. So back in the ancient times, there were some documented evidence that when there was a magneto collapse, that all organic life topside had petrified. Now, today, the way science spins it up is that um, it's more like if the magnetosphere collapses, you're actually looking at like a really strong magnetic pulse that's pretty much going to reset your brain. Like you're just going to completely be mind wiped and become like zombified. That's kind of at the level that they're trying to spin it off at today using all of this new terms they're coming up with AI and everything else under the sun to just try to misdirect and confuse everybody about a lot of these subjects. Um, but the reality is the Magneto collapse situation is very real. Um, there is a protocol in the Department of Homeland Security that actually does exist. It's called the Zombie Preparedness Protocol, and you can actually look that up and go to the DHS.gov website, and you can look into that. And not only does it doesn't only just stop at the Department of Homeland Security, but it also stems out into all branches of military and other facilities,
I just want to
agencies.
say I've researched the same thing, and it's there. Like we're not spewing
Yeah,
falsehoods. We're not
yeah,
trying to draw views in. Like we're just giving you
yeah.
where the research leads. That's the only thing we're doing.
So yeah, so one of the most interesting things about being in the United States is the level of desensitization that everybody has grown to be accustomed to now, thanks to Hollywood. And it's interesting to say that a lot of the things that are starting to unfold are starting to become quite visible. And with a lot of the stuff that a lot of people have found and discovered through my knowledge sharing and information is that a lot of this phenomenon is growing a little bit more strange and extreme every few months. And we're talking about particle changes at the atomic level. We're talking, different materials reacting differently to different light frequencies. We're talking about the northern lights getting really low down into the south. You can see what's going on in Siberia, Russia right now. You can
Yeah, the
see
whole thing, like the magnetic, like the pole is like moved what, like halfway
it's
across Russia in the past what, like 3 years or something.
yeah, it's moving
Like
relatively. It's moving relatively fast. Um,
and nobody's talking about it, dude. Like the first person that I've heard talk about it besides you and me, like really talk about it and all the implications of it was,
yeah,
and I find it weird. Like I found those articles and I sent them to you because I saw it on X. It was like Alex Jones is talking about it. Right? So if they're letting Alex Jones talk about it, I believe he's controlled opposition personally. So I'm just going to give my view. I believe he had legitimate people on to talk about it. But if Alex talks about it, then it's easily dismissed or called fake news. So they've killed two birds with one stone. They've let the truth out, but at the same time, they're hiding the truth through like a guy we don't fully trust anymore. Right? And I guarantee you, Alex is going to put it out there and then it's just going to go quiet again. And then you'll see just a bunch of smaller channels like us maybe pick it up if they start paying attention.
yeah. There's definitely a lot of truth in that. Um, they are. like we've discussed in the past, a lot of the orders that you see going in for electromagnetically protected bunkers are not just for some type of nuclear fallout. You
Yeah,
know,
or people are
they're
buying big
banking,
boats like yachts.
yeah, they're banking on the survivability. And we did talk about this in the last broadcast, but they are banking on this the survivability that maybe if it happens, it's only going to last. I don't know, like maybe a few days. Um, they're they're trying to bank on the fact that it's just going to be something that's going to be quick and it'll just pass through, and then whatever
I don't think
is
so.
left.
I don't think so.
Yeah, yeah. I think this the changes on this inhabited world that we're living on is very dynamic, and the predictability is practically impossible. Um, So you get a lot of Bible phrases and verses about no one shall know the day nor the hour when you hear those kind of things. That definitely applies because um, no one is in control and can know um, at what scale that's going to happen. And if we have to bank on one thing, is that when the board gets reset, it gets reset pretty hard. Because we are the fourth civilization
I mean, okay,
to yeah, uh-huh.
one thing that's bugging me, man, is you go back into Tartaria and understand the real history. One thing that plagues me, dude, is like all the insane asylums that seem to have happened like after the last reset. You know, like the mud flood they call it. You know, when everything got buried and turned to stone or melted, right? You ever look at mountains and wonder why there's like perfectly shaped windows and doorways like fucking 200 feet up in the air? You know what I mean? Like you look at some of these canyons, it just looks like they're just entire sloths of just melted, you know, concrete or brick or whatever. It just looks like they got incinerated. But I'm just saying the main thing is the insane asylums. They were built with horse and buggy in the middle of nowhere with nice stone and concrete and all this stuff. Like at that time, for one, that's basically impossible. And two, why were they spending so much money to take care of these people that weren't? If you go through and read the diagnosis and understand the science of where it was in the day, none of these people were insane. And they were all older people, in their like 20s and 30s and up, like hardly any kids. And then you look into the orphan train situation where they were shipping kids all over the United States. And then you find out that places like San Francisco already had infrastructure there before San Francisco was San Francisco. And then you find out there's more places like that, right? It's just like the pictures they take of these gigantic empty cities. Like what? No people are there? Like they're huge cities. Like it doesn't make any sense. So like, one thing I've always wondered is like what happened? You know what I mean? And the more we look into this and I see this play out in front of my own eyes, like it makes more sense that like something like this is like repeating, or a certain sect of people know when the cycle is. So like they use it to their advantage as a reset to clean everything up, right? Just like the last reset, who swooped up and grabbed major oil and all the major manufacturers, and you look back at the Titanic and who was on there and who was told to get off and this and that. It's like they knew it was coming, right? Like they planned the whole thing. There's only a few families that really control everything, and it's always been that way. And I think this is how it stays that way.
Yeah, there's so many different roads of information to go down. Um, but if we have to look at where we are today, that is the visual signs are no longer in the state of uh, cryo sleep, so to say. It's very obvious and clear now that when you're looking up at the sky, you can see that we clearly have some polarity changes definitely going on in shifts.
Tell them about the sun
Um,
today.
yeah, so it's in the middle of April. So today's April the 17th. And today at 5 o'clock, about 5 o'clock in the afternoon, we observed a new phenomenon today. So from here in Dallas at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, we looked up and the sun was in the center of the sky at the 12 o'clock position. And I'm still trying to get my head wrapped around this one, but the
Yeah,
sun
me
is
too.
at the 12 o'clock position in Dallas. And then Adam was observing the sun was also at the 12 o'clock position in Oklahoma at 5 noon. So today around 8:30, but close to 9 o'clock, we saw the sun setting today. So I honestly, I took a guess at 5 o'clock this afternoon that I'd probably see the sun go down at 10 p.m. tonight based on where the sun is. But it actually set at 8:30 p.m. So
Which is even more weird. And I didn't
yeah,
get to see
yeah,
it, so I'm not verifying that,
yeah.
because I was busy taking cover from a tornado. So excuse me, but it's odd either way.
Now I did document that. I was able to get a video and took a video of that of the sun being at 12 o'clock position and it being close to 5 o'clock in the afternoon. So uh, if we're not seeing, meaning that we are seeing constellation changes in the night sky, we're definitely seeing some constellation changes. Like I've stated before in past broadcasts, that the Orion constellation is basically staying constant. It's revolving in the same spot, east to west, day and night, month to month. It hasn't changed its position, but all of the other constellations have changed and merged with each other and are doing some really strange things like the Big Dipper, the Little Dipper, the Scorpio constellations. They're all crossing and intersecting each other, um, just doing some real strange things. And I try to get information from others around the US about that phenomenon. I've documented the phenomenon where, um, believe it or not, this is like some really strange stuff. I've seen a very large octagon constellation going from the northern sky across towards the eastern sky, intersecting, between last year and this year, the last couple of years, intersecting with the Orion belt. So this octagon would go over the sky, and then the octagon itself would encircle Orion's belt. And literally, like if you count all of the stars in a geometric fashion, like, if you drew an octagon out in front of you, that octagon would encircle um, Orion's belt as it
Yeah,
well.
like
It would move
yeah,
across the sky, north to south, and then encircle Orion's belt, and then go through it and pass down and set in the east sky, while Orion was still going from east to west. So, very interesting constellation changes, which brings us back to, full circle with these Bible phrases like, you will see signs in the heavens. Well, you can definitely see the signs in the heavens with the constellations because the constellations are definitely doing some very strange stuff. So
yeah, because
not
I was
only
on
do
the
we,
phone with you when we saw that hexagon shape in there, because like we both verified that. I remember that.
yeah, yeah. So not only do we see those changes, but we can see definitely a lot of Northern Lights activity. All this Northern Lights activity is, at the end of the day, from a science perspective, it's magnetic activity, right? It's something that is very visible when particles are really colliding and reaching these great distances over this magnetic bubble that's encircling us. So, um,
I think now would be a good time to lead into what the article I gave you says.
okay, so this article under Alex, where he did an interview with a neurosurgeon, basically was studying quantum biology, decided to come out and say that he's breaking his silence on what the governments have already known. He's stating that they don't want to tell the public that the Earth's magnetic shield is collapsing, and I'm just going to stop there. This is not something that they're not talking about. They don't want to bring up and scare everybody and get to the point
But
of
the reason why is they have to set up the control grid, the flock cameras that we see going up, the AI data centers. They have to be able to track and trace everybody in real time to keep people from moving from the dangerous zones to the good zones, right? Because if everybody knows about this and freaks out, they're all going to head to the zones that are safe. And then what happens? Then you deplete the resources and nobody lives. You understand? So this
yeah,
is one of those, like, this is like a real life movie playing out where they literally can't tell the truth, not because they don't want to, because people will start to freak out and move, and then it'll screw everything up. That's why you got this race for data centers to be built, so they can put up these control grids that you won't even be able to see. Right? They can just shut your car down. They can turn your phone off. They can keep you from going places. They could hit you with weather. Whatever they want to do.
well, I think when we say that the Magneto is collapsing and there's extreme electromagnetic radiation that's going to be coming down towards the surface, I don't think that the cameras are going to be working anymore or any electronic devices because we're looking at Carrington level event status at that point.
Oh yeah, when it hits, absolutely. But I'm saying prior
Yeah.
to that, if anybody found out beforehand, it's going to be chaos. Like this whole grid and data center, like they're probably building it to be easily rebuilt, like after, or they're taking precautions now for it,
Yeah.
right?
Well, yeah, they're definitely taking precautions already. Everybody's under the guise that, oh, well, there's some, see, everybody hasn't figured it out yet that they have been preparing for this event already for the past several years. So
Yes,
everybody's
longer,
thinking,
I think.
oh, what's coming, but nobody can figure it out, right? It's easy. We're talking about magnetic destruction. So what they're assuming is that they can get underground, which they already have all of the facilities up in the northern mountains. They've got them deep underground, like you hear about these things called dumps, like the deep underground military bases. They have those underground. You always hear the stories of all the truckers that are constantly trucking in for food and supplies down into these things so that it can last through some fallout for many years. Um, you hear about things being built under the ocean. Um, Lots of things, lots of
Yeah, because
stories.
according to the scientist that was talking about this, because there was a scientist and a neuroscientist. There was two different guys on Alex Jones' show, and one of them was explaining that the only thing that's going to live in the zones that are not safe is under the water. He said, literally, if you're not in a safe zone, the only thing that is going to survive is like the aquatic life in the ocean. Like
Yes.
no messing around. And he didn't say much on where was safe and where wasn't. But I have done some research, and maybe I could get with what's his name, the energy guy that comes in here. I don't know why I can't think of his name.
Mike?
Over Unity Research. Yeah, no,
Oh
yeah,
yeah,
over
that's
Unity
Brandon.
Research channel.
Yeah, yeah, there's Brandon.
Brandon.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and by the way, Brandon, I sent you an email with my contact stuff. I don't know if you got it, but like, I have a way to build some testing equipment if we need to and start testing some things. Everybody could start testing.
Yeah, so I guess what I can do just to kind of catch the audience up. So I did post to the wall that article, but I'll go ahead and just read it really quick, and we'll kind of just dissect it a little bit. and then add some annotation to it. So here's basically word for word what the article has that was published says. A neurosurgeon who studies quantum biology just broke the silence on what governments have known for years but won't tell the public. Earth's magnetic shield is collapsing, and when it fails completely, life on the surface dies. Dr. Jack Kruse warns that the extinction event could happen within the next 20 to 50 years. The terrifying part is not just the magnetic collapse, it's what happens when 8 billion people realize certain geographic zones will remain protected while others become uninhabitable. Kruse has spent over a decade documenting how magnetic field disruption strips electrons from human cells at the quantum level. The result is accelerated aging, fertility collapse, and cascading organ failure. It almost sounds like this article. I'm just adding an annotation in here. It almost sounds like this article um, looked through something for a message they were trying to convey, and they had AI summarize it for them. And I'm only saying that because a lot of the sections in some of these paragraphs are exactly word for word like what an AI would say when it's doing a summary on a thesis for somebody. But let me just continue on here. So it says Cruz has spent over a decade documenting how magnetic field disruption strips the electrons from the human cells at the quantum level. Uh, and he says he published his conclusion in 2013 after working through Einstein's equations. We were headed for a quick extinction, he wrote. The magnetic North Pole officially crossed into Russian territory in January of 2026. Actually, it crossed over much longer ago, but I guess they're just trying to put some emphasis that, hey, man, like things are accelerating here in 2026. That's my annotation, by the way. But continuing on, the U.S. Geological Survey confirms the field strength is declining. Okay, another annotation. Yeah, it's 100% visible, and you see it on all of the space weather feeds all the time. You see it on the NASA satellite broadcasts all the time. And if you ever go out late at night and sometimes look up at the sky, you may see skies at night that aren't black. Meaning, like if you got a clear night, you might go out and see, oh man, it looks red, it looks pink, it looks purple. That's due to this heavy solar activity that we're seeing in the nighttime sky. Okay, so continuing on, it said these are not projections, these are measurements. Okay, here's where it gets darker. Okay, ooh, we got to get dark on this, right? Cruz appeared on Alex Jones alongside nanotechnology researcher Jesse Beltran and documentary producer Edward Saul. The topic was not just magnetic collapse, it was migration control. Okay, so here's where we go into the Hunger Games and War Games mode, I guess, right? This stems into what you're, uh, you know, putting a theory out there for on the flock cameras, right? So if they, have all this huge surveillance network set up, that as something like this is collapsing, they can kind of, sit back on their couch, eat the popcorn, and watch the death machine, basically. I mean, at the end of the day, that's what it's going to become, right? Is entertainment for these power hungry individuals. But continuing on, I think what governments worry about is that if this information gets out, you're going to have 8 billion people that want to go to certain places, and then all hell is going to break loose, Cruz stated. This is the reason why digital ID is in, because they want to control people. Well, first of all, digital ID um, is going to have absolutely zero to do with the magnetic, collapse. nobody's going to be using their digital ID if there's no electronics that are working after a Magneto collapse, and nobody's, if people aren't petrified or zombified from the Magneto collapse. I feel like, some of the stuff that they're injecting in this article is all about, more of that fear, fear, fear.
Well, here's where they're put into our body. So they're going to be able to locate, track all this stuff. Energy to send.
Yeah, I think that comes down with the graphene, the nano graphene that they try to
Awesome.
get into a lot of
Yes,
things. Yeah, that's a whole nother. I mean, you could spin a lot of stories off from that section alone. Um, but we will have to come back to the nano tech part. Um,
I just wanted to dissect it for a second. The other side of that. I understand.
yeah, okay. Um, So going to this next part after the digital ID statement in that article, it says the implication is that authorities already know which regions will remain habitable during magnetic field failure. They're preparing infrastructure to manage the largest human migration in history, not through evacuation, but through restriction. Okay, so let's look at this paragraph for a moment. Um, First, they cannot predict how a magnetic field line is going to flow from one point to the other if it's always in motion and we are in a unpredictable setting, which we are, and it's completely dynamic. So um, they can choose and make a best effort guess, but it doesn't necessarily mean that that's what the predictable outcome is going to be. Um, it's kind of like, if you're in the ocean and there's a tsunami coming, you really can't predict, which way a wave is going to sway based on other unknown
Or break.
factors,
You
which
know what
they
I mean?
can't even get right and predict today. And time again, I mean, they have simple things that they can't even predict today. Like within the state of Texas, there are areas where lakes and rivers completely disappear and pop up out of nowhere in other places. They can't even predict where that water is going to go and where it's going to appear, right? So if they can't predict something as simple as that, then there is no way they're going to be able to accurately predict something else, like where a magnetic safe zone is going to be. You know, they can dice roll and make a best effort guess, but the situation is too dynamic. So, just like the phenomenon that we have here in Texas with water, movement moving around and unpredictably just popping up in some places out of nowhere. It's the same principle that's going to apply to magnetic field lines and safe zones. So I think it's gonna be interesting, right? And this just comes back, to one of those biblical things in the Bible, right? Like God is in control of everything. No one's gonna know. Yeah, yeah. Pretty much like all of these things. Nobody's gonna know. So we're just sitting back and enjoy the ride. Okay, so moving on after the digital ID, the implication is that the authorities already know which regions will remain. What's that?
I just wanted to point out something
Sure.
interesting. Don Neek Null 3299. She says, or he says, Lake Mead 44 inches a day, but that message was I had to literally click show the message, and now when I click, there you go, somebody else handled it. But yeah, like for some reason that message was subdued. That's awful. I mean, she just talking about how the lake's doing. You know what I mean? But go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. Yep. Yep. Uh, these are all good points. And one thing I also want to say during this broadcast, me and Adam want to thank everybody who's tuning in tonight and participating and joining and listening to this broadcast. It's probably going to be one of our most important broadcasts ever because, to be honest, with the scale that things are unfolding at, um, we're trying to do our best to get some of the information out there as quick as we can because one thing I really wanted to say during this broadcast tonight, which I think I might have already said at the beginning, is it's really interesting, right? That we're finally getting to that point where the information is getting to the scale where they can't hide it anymore. It's completely becoming visible. That now all of a sudden we're going to have a bunch of experts that are going to come out and magically know everything out of nowhere. Um,
Right. Yeah.
and we're just sitting back and watching, right? The stories, the myths, the inventions of information that are coming along with the data that we have historically been collecting and monitoring and observing. Um, but yeah, once again, thank you. Yeah, yeah. So yeah, getting right back into the because we're getting close to completing the article. So it says the implication is that authorities already know which regions will remain habitable during magnetic field failure. They're preparing the infrastructure to manage the largest human migration in history. Okay, we already got through that. Okay, so Cruz's theory hinges on the Schumann resonance. And I'm going to make some annotations of this article because I have a lot to say about this part. Cruz's theory hinges on Schumann resonance, Earth's natural electromagnetic frequency at 7.83 hertz. When artificial electromagnetic fields overpower the frequency, or when Earth's magnetic field weakens below critical thresholds, human biology loses its connection to the energy source it evolved with. Cellular electron flow collapses. Mitochondria fail. The body ages in years, what should take decades. Okay, one thing we can say 100% for sure, and I'm going to just say this to all of my subscribers. I don't know how many of you have been with me on this endeavor, but you all had remembered that one of the things that I used to stay on top of back in the day during lots of Comet ISON broadcasts, um, documentaries, and all that stuff. One of the things I used to do was do planetary alignments, Schumann resonance, and magnetometer watches. And I used to do those quite constantly and stay on top of that because of the things that we already knew and we could already see unfolding. And then so this is just staying in line with the article here because I just want to, you know, bring to light some of those past things that I used to discuss with my audience about. And a lot of that had to do with the human resonance. So, how does this human resonance tie in to a lot of this? Most of what he's saying has some truths to it, but everything else, if we try to think about all the stuff that they're playing into what we see in today's current time, like the zombie preparedness protocol, the makeshift ready electromagnetic bunkers, right? All tie into these things that could affect those things. However, there was this time when the Russians sent up, um, uh, let's just say a rocket ship or whatever, and they sent these organic life up into where towards space was. It's gonna just kind of, you know, I mean, you could look if you look this information up, you'll understand what I'm trying to convey here. But
I
basically,
already know what you're gonna say. It's
yeah,
there.
the end result was not pleasant. There was no Schumann resonance. There was no, you know, connection with the Earth, kind of like what we're going to observe if there's a Magneto collapse. Basically, the organic life forms became very primal and started tearing each other apart. That's well documented. Um, I'm sure many who want to go out and do some research on that, you'll find the information about that. But essentially, if we think about this article here on Cruz's theory that I'm reading right now, being hinging on the Schumann resonance, I think we can really equate that to the zombie preparedness protocol within the military and Department of Homeland Security. But I don't know how a makeshift ready bunker is going to be able to protect you from the loss or the effects of that. So, because where did they ever talk about the human
I don't know. There
resonance
there is
being, you know, inside these
right,
makeshift ready
but at the same
bunkers? Are
time
they
there is
are they playing the Schumann resonance inside the makeshift ready bunker? So, um, I don't know. That one's a little complicated, but yeah. So, what were you saying, Adam?
there is like that it is, but there's multiple underground structures and cities. So like if you look back through history, the people dug like an elaborate system for one of them. Like they had animals, they had like food down there growing, like all kinds of stuff. They had ventilation. I forget exactly where it was, but like there's proof that like entire like civilizations like lived under the ground. So I don't know if they could even back then at that for that. But saying about the Russian astronauts like basically going nuts, like that's all there. You know what I mean? So we know the effects of not having it, but like we don't know like where it ends or where it starts. Basically, we're kind of throwing darts at the wall right now. I mean, we neither you or I could answer that question.
Yeah. There's so many other things that go along with that too. Like, you know, like if you've ever done any scuba diving, and I don't even have to say relate anything to scuba diving, but just aquatic life in general that lives down, further down miles down inside the ocean at different pressure levels. Their bodies are way different than everything else that lives or exists up in the upper layers. So if you were
Yes.
down deep into the ocean and you're at the lowest level, you could go as slowly as you want, coming all the way back up topside, but there's no way to say you're going to be able to survive the ascent all the way up topside. So even if there are people that are actively, let's say, procreating and living deep within inside of the earth, I think it's going to be
They,
very challenging to be able to come out and to adapt and to live topside depending on how far in there they really are. Um,
or how long? You know what I mean?
yeah,
You know what that's totally true.
yeah, but yeah, it's just one of those things where, unless you have taken the journey and you've been in there and you've coming out and you're able to share that somehow, um, that one's very challenging just because of the way it's just going to impact your physiology, I would say, your anatomy. Um, and I think even with specialized diving equipment, it's still hard to go down pretty deep. And there's a limit. There's still a limit on how far down they can actually go. Uh, so, trying to think about some of those things is quite challenging and complex. His Okay, so there's definitely some interesting stuff on Cruz's theories on the Schumann resonance. So that's pretty much my annotation on that. Okay, so let's go continue on. We got 3 paragraphs left. So he believes governments understand this mechanism. He believes they have identified safe zones. He believes digital identity systems are being deployed not for convenience or security, but for triage. Okay. All right. So, maybe it's like that funny scenario they played out in some movie where they have like a human lottery. No, that's completely, BS in my opinion. Um, let's see. He built, okay. All right. So, next paragraph. Some researchers interpret Cruz's work as a warning about modern technologies' electromagnetic pollution, not planetary magnetic collapse. Other sources argue that his theories about quantum biology and extinction are speculative extrapolations, not proven science. Okay, well, this brings a couple of arguments. Yeah, yeah, go ahead.
Is that we rate like this.
Okay, you did break up a little bit there. You may have to repeat that.
Okay. When I was watching his interview, he said that the creation of 3G, 4G, and 5G, and moving on to 6, inherently has something to do with this rapid succession of these effects. He's saying we're somewhat causing it.
Yes, that also very much well could be true. That's definitely a theory. I feel there could be some truth to that, and let me say why. Because honestly, if we have to look at the trend of how fast or how drastic the changes are and all of these changes, and the rate of speed at which all of these deployment of infrastructure have been going up, um, it seems, if we're looking at it from an observation scale, that um, they do kind of coincide with each other a little bit. But can we actually say that's the 100% root cause? That one's tough, but we can definitely say that the visual signs are there. That it just so happens that a lot of this phenomenon did start speeding up as this infrastructure started growing. So whether or not anybody wants to, you know, have a day of, let's say, this thing they call it Earth Day. You heard about Earth Day?
Yep.
Imagine if on Earth Day they say turn off everything. Just turn off, all of the, anything that emits an electromagnetic pulse of any kind or a frequency or whatever. Turn off your cell phones, turn off your digital broadcast centers, your cell towers, and just stay home for a day and enjoy your family, and no digital, no electronic anything. And then just have uh, a facility who is willing to be transparent, obviously, who can actually see what actually happens within that 24, or if it's worldwide, that 24 or 48-hour period to Earth. If all of a sudden all of this frequency transmission just all of a sudden just stops for a couple of days, you know, what would happen? But that is a fantasy world we're living in, because that is never going to happen. But, you know, it does beg the question, what if everybody just happened to just go dark for a couple of days? You know, would that dramatically change something on Earth? I think.
I don't know. Then that's going to be another key point that we're going to have to circle back to. And I'd also like to say, over Unity, you're right. Like I've researched that. Like every time we upgrade a system, like majorly like that, there is like
Yeah. All right, so we're down to the last couple of lines here. But if he's right, the question is not whether the collapse will happen. The question is whether you'll be allowed to move when it does. Well, first of all, I laugh anytime I see a line like this in any article. And the greatest thing, I can compare a statement like this to is this. If you've ever lived in a city and you have a 5 or a 6 lane highway, right? When one car, and we're talking one car, crashes or stalls in any of the 6 lanes, anywhere near the city, what do you get? You get miles and miles and miles of backed up, stopped traffic. It's the end of the world. Nobody's going anywhere for a few hours until they get that one car out of the way. And how it works today is You get one emergency vehicle that comes and shuts down all 6 lanes for one stalled car, no matter which lane the car is sitting in on a 6 lane highway. And it's, think about this at scale. Uh, if the collapse actually happens and people go batshit crazy, um, nobody's going to be going anywhere. Because think about it, people are trying to run and escape and get to somewhere. They don't know where they're going to go. They just want to hope that they're going somewhere they're going to get to to be safe. But when one of the ants on the ant farm does one thing, the rest is coming to a complete stop. So, um,
And let's be real, if this is all true and they don't want people to move, they'll blow up parts of the highway and then they'll put a checkpoint in.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, the situation will most definitely get more extreme, um, and then that's when more extreme measures will be taken against its own people, right? Um, they're already well aware, and even with AI, they probably have it all modeled out, especially like today. Like, honestly, like if you come back to the statement you made about like Flock and everything and the complete surveillance network, what are the key points about that surveillance network? It's the model. At the end of the day, the data is being fed somewhere and it's being assessed in some system. It's being weighed and analyzed in all its glory. So, one thing they can do with that data is they can take that data and they can model it and they can run every possible scenario for whatever given scenario they want based on people's traffic habits over a fixed period of time. So, if they want to take, the last 2 years of data. Oh, okay,
Like on
we're
roads
we're
that
losing.
nobody even uses. Like,
Wait. You're gonna have to
am I
restart
clear
that.
now?
Okay, yeah, try it again.
Small town. So for the country boys too, adding into that.
Yeah. Yeah, so they could take that data from 2 years, 2 years at scale, or even they can go back even probably even further than that. And they can just basically model out every single scenario. They can model out every single scenario and then set up the best action plan based on those models. And that's where they start reducing the effort required from Intel on how to secure things much faster. And, that's definitely got to be factored into this equation too. But like I said, if we think about this escalation and this data model, if we think about, let's just say that this Magneto collapse actually happens, you know, they're not going to have a warning. You know, we're not going to have a warning. They're not going to have a warning. Nobody's going to have a warning. If it continues at the scale that it's currently at, like every 3 months, we can keep seeing the visual sign. It keeps coming down, 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 slowly and slowly and slowly and slowly. Um, maybe that could pose as the early warning, and probably like at the scale that we're monitoring at, they're monitoring it at, and they're preparing accordingly. Um, but we are having these periods of time where something comes out of nowhere. It's completely dynamic. You don't get a warning, kind of like your storm situation today. Look at the storm situation that happened down at in Texas, where that really huge flood happened instantaneously. But I mean, yeah, it came out of nowhere. They didn't have a warning, but yet they're testing all of the tornado and sirens and other systems. And I think we just lost Adam there. I think he'll probably rejoin or he'll pop back in. So yeah, just we'll just wait for Adam to rejoin us, but I'll go ahead and keep continuing on here. But so at the end of the day, no matter what articles that they're publishing out here, prime time in social media land, their odds are the same as our odds because the entire playing field on Earth is um, equal to scale based on how dynamic sudden changes could be. Uh, and historically, like if we're looking at all the religious saying and phrases, quatrains, you know, everything, it's like, only God is in control. So nobody's going to truly know the day and the hour and whatever shift the higher power wants to make adjustments out here on his playing field. So huh, nobody is going to be able to escape that fact. All right, so one of the things outside of the Magneto collapse, which is something else that I was going to try to put in here earlier during the broadcast, was I said I was going to call out some of these channels, right? But there's I've been trying to get on with Paul Begley to re-bring this subject matter back to light, but I think really his flow of information mostly has been with Mike from around the world. Mike has been trying to cover a lot of the information, uh, concerning the magnetosphere, the atmospheric pressure, um, the space phenomenon. A lot of those things. His driver has more or less been about water, but not a lot has gone into exactly what I've been focusing topics on, and I think that may be due to that we're getting too close to hitting sensitive buttons about realistic phenomenon that's unfolding right now that's completely visible at this moment. So, yeah, so there's Dane Wingington. I've tried to get on with Dane Wingington. Uh, Somehow there was a disconnect with Michael Bradbury, which is Mr. MBB333. I tried to get on and talk science with him because he used to get on and we used to talk about space weather science and the comet stuff before his channel got really big. Now his moderators decided to just block me and never allow me to speak with him. No matter what avenue I tried to go down, um, they would just prevent me from speaking with him. But he would send me a shout out at times when he was paying attention to his chat box. So I'm just assuming it's just the games that we're playing with the people that are trying to control the information. Many of you have known I've tried to do some of the science broadcasts, talk about energy, and they do things like they just completely cut off the sound of my video, like in my last broadcast when we were really getting in heavy about AI and a lot of other things that are unfolding, especially with like this whole energy situation that's a complete joke. Um, and if you are a subscriber and you've been with me for many, many years, you already know that this whole thing with energy, it's ridiculous. They're just trying to keep the war machine going on. They want to, still control the people. They still want to control the electricity. But the reality is, we have the power, we have the technology. We can self sustain, but they are controlling that technology. Rules for thee, but not for me is their motto. And anyone else basically just gets disappeared that tries to do anything to help the rest of the world. And it's insanity. It's complete insanity. Um, but that is another discussion for another day. And I'm hoping that we can get Adam back on here, but it looks like he's experienced a hard drop. Could be due to power. Um, he did have a tornado come through. He lost electricity, and yeah, I'm just catching. It looks like Adam is back in, but he's only in the chat here. So, and you guys already know, like, I can't respond to any chat messages in here. I can only do this via audio right now. So, um, yeah. So I think in calling out these channels, I think I'm going to make some predictions here that you've already seen. I've unlocked some of the content displaying the phenomenon with the weather, with the cloud ceiling, explaining the measurement of time. You've already seen I've tried to be in touch with some of the other channels and actually get them the relevant information that they actually need to be sharing with everybody concerning the magnetosphere, concerning the barometric pressure, which involves the safety of people's travel, due to its effect, whether they're flying or whether they're on land. You're running into the situation with, decompression effects because of the rapid pressure changes. I mean, if you're experiencing, almost a 1 bar pressure change from one zip code to another, you know, like I said, I always use the scuba diving analogy because I'm hoping it's the simplest thing to equate this to. That is equalizing, trying to get from one pressure level to the next safely without getting the bends or being asphyxiated or dying or um, blacking out or some organ failure or something along those lines. Um, but you hear a lot of stories and reports where you have cases where people are driving from one area to another and they're just crashing and dying or they're just dying all of a sudden. uh, some of these cases revolve around that types of phenomenon, but it's never discussed. Nobody ever brings this up and discusses it. So I'm the only person on the entire internet discussing this phenomenon, this barometric pressure change, these extreme swings and pressures all over the US that are occurring right now, probably worldwide, but I don't travel all over the world and take measurements constantly everywhere I go. Um, and but what I can say is that you know, these pressure changes are very real and they could have strong effects on people, who may have certain types of blood conditions or whatever. Um, in some cases, it's the same for me. I have to be careful flying because, of those same types of phenomena. Um, and also traveling. I did experience some extreme pressure changes bodily when I was going through some of those zones and had to travel at a much slower speed to safely balance out the pressure changes. And that's when I came up. At first, I thought about, when you're living in a certain zip code and they have posted speed limits. I used to think when I made this discovery after traveling across the US that are they really changing the speed limit um, in certain areas to a certain speed to equate for those pressure changes? But I don't think that's the case. I I wanted to kind of believe that for some of the most idiotic speed limit situations I've seen where speed doesn't make any sense. But in fact, that's not the case. So I'm just going to scrap that and just go with the fact that um, because I wanted to believe for a moment when I was evaluating that they already knew about the pressure conditions. So they were trying to adjust that rate of speed travel to adjust for those pressure changes so that they have less. Of course, they would say they would have less accidents, but maybe they're factoring in unknowingly that maybe some of those accidents were also caused by other health conditions, which can be triggered by these sudden pressure effects on the human body. Uh, but these are all topics in the past during those travels, which I talked about. I also talked about that in Paul Begley's feed when I did that interview with them about the barometric pressure changes when traveling across the United States. That these are all definitely real phenomenon that should be factored into this equation because with the magnetometer having its sudden changes, that means sudden pressure changes as well. And I used to say jokingly that uh, you know if we get like certain pockets of pressure changes, you know, is the average person going to feel anything if something like that happens? No, they're not because you're going to black out before you get to experience anything. So just be thankful that it'll be a peaceful a peaceful time for yourself. At least that was my interpretation based on what I know of just the physics of it all. Um, yeah, so I think we've pretty much done an overextended broadcast tonight, but they are putting out information in the mainstream now about the magnetosphere. It can't be ignored anymore. There's a lot of distraction going on about war, government, the presidency. Um, Listen, if there's one thing you can take away tonight, it's this. All of the signs are here 100%. You can see the cloud ceiling and the attitude of the clouds. You can see everything that has dropped and changed dramatically. The constellations, the sky colors. You can see that the governments of the world have stopped caring about everything 100%. And you have to ask yourself the question, Why? When you put all of the pieces together and you see everything that's going on scientifically, you already have the answer. You already have the answer. And, this is where we are. So I would just continue to watch how they are currently preparing the emergency systems. Watch the constellations. Continue to watch spaceweather.com. Look at the magnetometer. Just watch, the colors at night of the skies, and you know, uh, look out for high wind, because they're definitely putting in infrastructure for that right now. And watch the USGS for the earthquake information, because these sudden pressure changes also create ground shift. And just coming back to Dane Wingington and weather, you already know that with all of the planes doing the atmospheric aerosol injection, the nano material that they're spreading, um, is not something that's just settling on the ground. It at scale, like the aquarium analogy, which is like if you have a 20 gallon fish aquarium, and you fill the water all the way up to the top, one drop of blue dye in the top of the aquarium would illustrate all of the planes that they're doing the aerosol injection with all over this world, this dome, whatever you want to call it, doesn't matter. We're in the same fishbowl. That one drop will continue to saturate that 20-gallon fish tank at the nano scale and turn all of that 20 gallons of water blue. So you may ask yourself the question, why in 10 days doesn't the blue dye settle to the bottom of the fish aquarium? It's because of the weights that we're talking about here at the nanoscale. It's so light, there's so much of it that it's just constantly circulating and floating constantly. So that at scale is carrying a lot of conductivity, and it's making a connection with everything. And that's why you have extreme plasma situations going on all over the world right now, the US included. China, Dubai, um, everywhere, all over the US, extreme plasma. Um, Large volumes of mammals are getting shocked, human life included, buildings, cars, trucks. You're seeing a lot of that now at a very large scale. That is because the plasma that's very active right now is making contact because of all this nano particulates that are highly conductive, is connecting with everything that's moving. And it's creating a conduit, creating the shortest path to ground from sky to earth, shocking things. So, on a rainy day, you used to be able to go out safely, even when it's raining and lightning was, out. And you used to be able to just watch it, even if it's hitting something, and you could feel like, okay, man, that's just lightning striking something. But the reality today is that due to the volume density of the nanoparticulates that are floating around in the air, your safety level has decreased way more, um, between then and now. Now it's more, the danger level is more elevated because of the situation that they have created, where they were adding a plus to somewhat dim the sky, reflect the solar radiation back out, of Earth, back out into whatever direction it's going, but not towards the ground. Um, the negative side of that is that now they have elevated the heat, elevated the pressure, elevated the danger for more plasma exchange between sky to ground. So that's going to be my closing statement for today. And we're going to try to do some more broadcasts soon. We're still going to try to keep the weekly on. And I want everybody to just take this very lightly and try to have an open mind. And if you haven't subscribed, subscribe. Subscribe to Adam. Subscribe to Brandon. Brandon's a good guy. He's holding the torch for the electrical energy stuff. Good builder there. And Mike was on last week. Occasionally, we do have Henning Kemner on, so we're going to try to have him on soon. He's constantly traveling the U.S. by truck, and he does have a lot of information to share. So you can subscribe to Henning Kimner too, and we're hoping to bring a lot more information here soon. There's a lot, I really want to bring forward about a lot of the nonsense that's going on with artificial intelligence. Um, but we're going to have to save that for another broadcast. So I want to wish everybody a good night. Happy Friday. And thanks for tuning in. And we'll have another one here soon. Cheers, Godspeed, and hold the light for everybody. Cheers.